I still remember the sound of forks scraping against plates that night. Everyone was talking, laughing, passing dishes around the table, except no one passed me anything. I sat there with an empty plate, my hands folded in my lap. My husband, Daniel, didn't even look at me. His mother leaned across him to hand the breadbasket to his sister, skipping right over me as if I wasn't even sitting there. "Can you pour me some water?" Daniel asked, sliding his glass toward me. "No, please." No glance, just an order, like I was a server in my own home. My chest tightened. I forced a smile, grabbed the pitcher, and poured. His mother's eyes flickered over me, cold and sharp. "Careful," she said. "Don't spill. This tablecloth is expensive." Her words stung, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Like I was clumsy. Like I didn't belong at their perfect table. Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Mom's right. You're always so nervous." Laughter rippled around the table, his parents, his sister, even his uncle. I swallowed hard, keeping my eyes on my plate. Inside, I was screaming. "Why don't you defend me, Daniel? Why don't you see how small they make me feel?" But all I managed to whisper was, "I'm fine." No one heard me. Or maybe they just didn't care. Halfway through dinner, Daniel's sister leaned back in her chair, smirking at me. "So," she said loudly, "are you still looking for work? Or are you just staying home these days?" The tone was casual, but I knew what she meant. Lazy? Dependent? A burden? I felt my face burn. I opened my mouth, searching for words, but Daniel spoke first. "She's taking her time," he said with a shrug. "You know how it is." The table erupted with soft chuckles. My stomach dropped. I wanted to slam my fist down and scream, "I'm not lazy. I moved here for you, Daniel. I gave up my job, my city, my life for this family." But instead, I forced a laugh that sounded more like a cough. His father cleared his throat. "Back in my day, wives didn't sit around waiting. They contributed, one way or another." I pressed my nails into my palm under the table, hard enough to leave Mark's dad. "Please," Daniel muttered, but his tone was weak, almost apologetic toward him, not me. I stared at my husband, searching for a sign, anything that told me I wasn't crazy for feeling humiliated. But he didn't meet my eyes. He just kept eating, like this was all normal. A sudden heaviness pressed on my chest. I felt like I was fading, like my voice no longer belonged here. "Excuse me," I said softly, pushing my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor, sharp and loud. Every head turned. "Where are you going?" his mother asked, her eyebrow arched. "Bathroom," I whispered. I walked out slowly, steady enough not to look weak, but inside, I was breaking. The laughter behind me grew louder once I stepped away, muffled but cruel, as if the moment I left the room, I didn't matter. I shut the door to the bathroom and leaned against the sink, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. That was the moment I knew why I wasn't part of this family. I was furniture, a shadow, an outsider in my own home. Before all of this, before the dinners where I felt invisible, before the whispers and looks I was someone. I had a job I loved. I worked in a small design firm, nothing fancy, but it was mine. My days were full of color, creativity, and people who actually valued what I brought to the table. I remember my boss once telling me, "You have an eye for things people miss." I held on to that compliment like it was a medal. It made me feel seen. And then there was Daniel. Back then, he was everything warm, attentive, almost too good to be true. He used to call me at midnight just to say, "I can't sleep without hearing your voice." I believed him. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate. He said, "We'll build a life together. My family will love you." His words painted a picture so bright, I didn't see the shadows waiting behind it. My friends warned me. One of them, Claire, grabbed my hand the week before the wedding. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You're giving up your job, your apartment, your independence. That's a lot for love." I laughed then, shaking her off. "It's not giving up," I said. "It's starting over. With him." God, if only I had listened. I traded my little apartment with its creaky windows for Daniel's family's big house. At first I thought it was temporary just until we saved enough for our own place. But months turned into a year, and the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a cage. There was this unspoken rule that I should blend in, disappear into their rhythm. His mother controlled the kitchen. His father controlled the conversations. His sister controlled the laughter. And Daniel, he controlled nothing. I kept telling myself, "Be patient. They'll come around. Love will be enough." But each day I felt myself shrinking, piece by piece. Sometimes Late at night, I would lie awake and whisper into the dark, "Who am I now?" The silence always answered back. Asterisk, at first, I tried to convince myself it was just an adjustment period. New house, new people, new rhythms. But the signs were very small, sharp things that cut deeper than anyone could see. The first dinner, I reached for the serving spoon, and his mother gently took it from my hand. "Oh, don't worry, dear," she said, smiling tightly. "We handle meals our way." It sounded polite, but the message was clear. This is not your place. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. I thought it was reassurance, but it felt more like a warning. Don't push back. Another time. His sister showed me around the neighborhood. I tried to make conversation, but she kept scrolling through her phone. At one point, she muttered, "You'll get used to how things work here, if you're patient enough." I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess I will." Inside, I felt small dot. It wasn't one big act of cruelty. It was 1,000 tiny exclusions. Not being asked what I wanted for dinner. Not being told about family plans. Until the last minute. Sitting in a room full of people and realizing no one had looked at me in over an hour. And Daniel, he kept saying, "They just need time. Don't take it personally." But I was taking it personally, because how could I not? This was my life. My marriage. My new home. I started to notice things about myself I didn't like. I grew quieter. I second-guessed every word. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I apologized for things I hadn't even done. One night, I asked Daniel, "Do you see how they treat me? Or am I going crazy?" He hesitated too long. Then he said, "They don't mean it's, you just notice everything too much. Notice everything too much." Those words replayed in my head for weeks, echoing like an accusation. That was the beginning of my unraveling, the slow loss of the woman I used to be. It was subtle at first, but then the rejection started to feel deliberate. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found his mother and sister whispering. The moment I stepped in, the air froze. They smiled too quickly, like masks snapping into place. "Good morning," I said softly. His sister glanced at me, then turned back to her phone. His mother just nodded, busying herself with the kettle. I stood there, waiting for someone to ask if I wanted tea, if I wanted breakfast, anything. Nothing. Finally, I poured my own cup, the sound of boiling water filling the silence. When I carried it to the table, Daniel walked in. His mother's face lit up instantly. "Danny, sit. I made your favorite." She slid a plate toward him, steaming and perfect. I stared at the food, then at my empty spot. Nothing for me, not even a slice of toast. Daniel didn't notice. Or maybe he did and pretended not to. Later that week, we were all in the living room. His father asked about a family trip planned for the weekend. Everyone chimed in with excitement. I sat quietly, waiting for someone to explain the details. Finally, I asked, "Where are we going?" His sister smirked. "Oh, it's just something we usually do. Family tradition." I blinked. "But I'm family now, aren't I?" The room went silent. Daniel coughed and muttered, "Of course you are." But his tone was weak, like even he didn't believe it. That night, I confronted him in our room. "Why didn't you say anything? Why do they keep leaving me out?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You're overthinking again. They don't mean to exclude you. They just aren't used to having someone new around." "Daniel, I'm not new. I'm your wife." My voice cracked, but he didn't look at me. Instead, he said, "Can you just let it go for once?" That was the moment I realized I was fighting for a place in a house where no one wanted me. The little things piled up, each one cutting deeper than the last. At dinner one night, his mother passed dishes around the table. She served Daniel, his father, his sister, everyone except me. The bowls skipped right over my hands like I was invisible. I waited, thinking maybe she'd notice. She didn't. "Could you pass me some rice?" I asked gently. Her eyes flicked up at me, cool and detached. "Oh, there's not much left." "Better let Daniel have it." Daniel didn't say a word. He scooped the last of it onto his plate, and I sat there chewing dry bread, pretending it didn't matter. Inside it burned. Another day. His sister came into our room without knocking. She glanced around, then said, "You know, this used to be my space before you came. Feels weird seeing it taken over." I forced a smile. "Well, it's ours now." "Daniel and I," she cut me off. "Yeah, but you won't be here forever. People come and go." She shrugged and walked out, leaving her words hanging like poison in the air. That night, I asked Daniel again, "Do you hear what they say to me? Do you even notice?" He exhaled heavily, irritation flashing across his face. "Why do you always pick fights? They're just being themselves." Don't take everything so personally. My chest tightened, so it's my fault for wanting to feel like part of this family. He rubbed his temples. You're exhausting. Me. I can't keep defending you when you're the one making everything harder. Defending me, the words stung. He wasn't defending me at all, he was defending them. Lying in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, wide awake. Their voices replayed in my head. The skipped plates, the cold stares, the whispers that stopped when I entered the room. It was like being a ghost in my own home. And the cruelest part, Daniel had given me nothing, no shield, no comfort, no hand to hold. Just silence. That silence hurt more than their words ever could. Asterisk, I stopped recognizing myself. Days blurred together in that house. I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, dreading the small cruelties that I knew would come. Sometimes they were sharp, like knives. Other times, quiet and hidden, like poison slipped into water. I remember one evening walking into the living room where they were laughing over tea. The second I stepped in, the laughter died. Conversations shifted, eyes looked away. The air turned heavy. I sat down anyway, trying to smile. What's so funny? I asked. His sister gave me a half smirk. Oh, it's just family stuff. You wouldn't get it. Family stuff? That phrase hit me like a slap. I excused myself, pretending I had a headache. But in the bathroom, I leaned against the sink and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked hollow, my skin pale. The smile I tried to wear was gone the second. No one was watching. The truth was clear, I didn't belong. And Daniel, he didn't even notice when I curled up next to him that night, waiting for warmth. All I got was his back turned to me. I wanted to shake him, scream, look at me. I'm breaking here. Instead, I whispered, I don't think they'll ever accept me, he muttered, half asleep. Stop overthinking. That word became my cage. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't enough, pretty enough, good enough, strong enough for them, for him. I'd sit in the shower, letting the water hide my tears. My body felt heavier each day, my spirit smaller. I avoided mirrors because I didn't want to face the emptiness staring back at me. But the worst part wasn't their rejection. It was the silence from the one person who promised he'd never let me feel alone. And I realized maybe I wasn't fighting them anymore. Maybe I was fighting him too. Asterisk nights became the hardest. When the house went quiet, that's when my thoughts screamed the loudest. I'd lie in bed next to Daniel, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every glance, every silence from the day. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Sometimes I wanted to wake him up just to ask, do you even see me anymore? Do you care that I'm disappearing? But I knew his answer before he even opened his mouth. Annoyance, dismissal, that same cold wall. So I swallowed it. Again. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I whispered into the dark, my voice shaking. I feel like I don't matter here. Not to them, not even to you. He sighed, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. Why do you always have to make everything about you? That was the moment my heart cracked a little deeper. It wasn't just his family pushing me out, it was him handing me over to the cold. After that, I stopped talking as much. I moved through the house like a ghost, present but unseen. Meals became quiet battles with myself. Should I sit at the table and risk the stares, the whispers? Or should I eat alone, in silence, pretending it was my choice? Most days, I chose silence. But silence eats you alive. It makes you question if you ever existed at all. I started keeping a small notebook hidden under my pillow. Every night, I poured myself into it, the words I couldn't say out loud. The anger, the sorrow, the longing. Sometimes I'd write the same sentence over and over again. I just want to be loved without conditions. I read those words so many times, they started to look foreign. Maybe love like that didn't exist. At least, not for me. And in those dark nights, I wondered if walking away would hurt less than staying. Because what was the point of holding on, if I was the only one still holding? Asterisk time blurred into a routine of silence. Days, weeks, maybe even months. I couldn't tell anymore. Life in that house felt like walking on glass. Every step was careful, measured, controlled. Because one wrong move could turn into another reminder that I didn't belong. At first, I thought maybe if I tried harder, cooked better meals, stayed out of their way, smiled when it hurt, they'd see my effort. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. My dishes were too plain, my clothes too simple, my presents too heavy. One afternoon, I walked into the living room where Daniel's mother and sister were laughing at something on the TV. I sat down at the edge of the couch, not too close, just enough to feel included. Within minutes, his sister looked at me and said casually, "Oh, we were just about to have some family time." I understood. She didn't need to say more. I stood, forced a smile, and walked back to my room. The laughter behind me grew louder, sharper, almost mocking. That became my life, standing at doorways I was never invited through. Daniel noticed my withdrawal, but instead of reaching for me, he treated it like a relief. He no longer had to balance me against them. I had removed myself from the equation. Maybe that's what he wanted all along. I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped wearing makeup. I stopped reaching out to friends. When they texted, "We haven't seen you in forever," I'd type out excuses, then delete them, and finally just let the phone go dark. I wasn't me anymore. I was just someone, filling space in a house that didn't want me. At night, I'd look at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked pale, hollow, like she'd been drained drop by drop. I'd whisper to her, "Where did you go? When did you disappear?" But she never answered. The silence of that house had swallowed me whole. Asterisk, the suffocation wasn't just in the air, it was in every interaction. Small things that looked harmless from the outside carried weight that crushed me inside, like meals. Dinner was the worst. Plates would be set, laughter would roll across the table, and I'd sit quietly, forcing bites past the lump in my throat. Whenever I tried to join a conversation, Daniel's mother would cut me off with, "Oh, he doesn't like when people do that," or "That's not how we've always done it." Her words were never sharp, never openly cruel. They were gentle, enough to seem harmless, but sharp enough to slice me down where no one else could see. Daniel never stopped her. He'd chew his food, sip his drink, and let it happen. Sometimes he'd even smile, as if agreeing. One evening, I decided to cook dinner myself. I spent hours preparing his favorite dish, something my mother used to make when I was growing up. I thought just for once they'd see me as part of them. When the food was served, his father took one bite, set his fork down, and said flatly, "It's different. Not bad, just not our way." The room went quiet. My hands trembled under the table. Daniel cleared his throat and said, "Yeah, maybe stick to what Mom usually makes." I nodded, excused myself, and carried my plate to the sink before anyone else finished. I locked myself in the bathroom, sat on the cold floor, and let the tears fall silently. It wasn't about the food. It was never about the food. It was about me, how I could pour every bit of myself into something and it still wouldn't matter. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel, I whispered, "Do you even see what's happening to me?" He sighed, rolled away, and said, "You take everything too seriously." That was the moment I realized he wasn't blind. He just didn't care. The walls of that house weren't just closing in anymore. They were sealing shut. And I was the one suffocating inside. Asterisk. It didn't happen in some dramatic explosion. It wasn't a screaming match or a slammed door. It was smaller than that, so small, it almost seemed unimportant. But that's the thing about breaking points. They don't arrive with fire. They arrive like a pinprick that bursts the balloon you've been holding together for too long. It was Daniel's birthday. I had saved 4 weeks, cutting corners on myself just to buy him something meaningful, a watch he once admired at the mall. I wrapped it carefully, wrote a card by hand, and waited for the right moment to give it to him. The family gathered in the living room that evening. His mother brought out a cake, his father gave a toast, his sister handed him a neatly wrapped box. Laughter filled the room, the kind that never seemed to include me. When it was my turn, I walked over, handed him the gift, and smiled nervously. He tore the paper quickly, glanced at the watch, and forced a polite smile. "Oh," he said, holding it up for his family to see. "She got me this." "No thank you." No warmth in his voice. Just she. His mother leaned in, her lips curving into that familiar smirk. "Sweet of her to try," she said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "But you already have better ones, don't you?" The room chuckled. Daniel didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He set the watch aside, reached for his sister's gift, and moved on as though mine had been a minor inconvenience. I sat there, heat rising in my chest, my smile frozen like a mask. Inside, something cracked. It wasn't about the watch, it wasn't about the words. It was the silence, the way he let them belittle me, the way I had become invisible in his world. Later that night, while he laughed with his parents in the kitchen, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the empty space beside me. That was when I knew love had left me long ago. All I had left was the echo of it. And echoes can't keep you alive. Asterisk, I couldn't sleep that night. The sound of their laughter downstairs crawled under my skin, sharp and mocking. Every word replayed in my head like a cruel tape. Sweet of her to try. I wanted Daniel to come upstairs, to sit beside me, to say something, anything that told me I wasn't imagining this loneliness. But when he finally came to bed, he didn't look at me. He smelled like whiskey and cake, his smile still lingering from the party. "You should have seen Dad's face when Anna gave me that book," he said, grinning as he pulled off his shirt. He was so proud. I stared at him, waiting for a mention of my gift, waiting for him to notice my silence. He didn't, so I asked quietly, "Did you even like the watch?" He glanced at me, surprised. "It was fine," he muttered, crawling under the blanket. "You didn't have to buy something so expensive. My family knows me better, that's all." My family? The words hit harder than he realized. Because in that sentence, I wasn't part of it. I was just there. I felt my throat tighten. My chest ached with the kind of pain that doesn't show on the outside. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask why he let them treat me like a guest in my own life. But instead, I whispered, "Do you ever notice how they look at me? How they talk about me?" He sighed, rolling away. "You're overthinking again. Don't make everything about you." That was it. The balloon that had been stretched thin finally tore open. My heart didn't just crack, it collapsed. I turned my face to the wall, hot tears soaking the pillow. For the first time, I didn't fight them. I let them come. Because that night, lying next to the man who once swore he loved me, I realized I was more alone with him than I had ever been without him. And that truth was unbearable. The morning after felt different. Not louder, not dramatic, just empty. Daniel left early with his parents. Something about a meeting, and the house went quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the living room, and the sight of the half-eaten cake on the table felt like a wound. The gift bag Anna had given him sat proudly on the counter, his parents' cards lined up neatly beside it, my watch. It was nowhere. He must have tucked it away, forgotten already. I sat on the couch with my coffee, staring at the walls. For weeks I had convinced myself to endure, to keep trying, to keep smiling even when their words cut me. But last night made something clear. I could set myself on fire to keep them warm. And they'd still complain about the smoke. My phone buzzed. A message from my cousin, the only one I confided in. "You okay? Saw your post. Looked like you were alone at the party." I typed back slowly. She sent a heart emoji, then added, "You don't deserve that. You're stronger than this." Stronger. The word lingered. I'd just been surviving on scraps of love, hoping things would change. I remembered Daniel's words, "Don't make everything about you." But wasn't marriage supposed to be about us? About both of us? I stood up, pacing the room. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from a rising clarity I hadn't let myself feel before. If they saw me as an outsider, maybe it was time I gave them exactly what they wanted. The thought didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom trying to break through the cracks. For the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because deep inside, I knew the next step wasn't about saving this marriage, which about saving myself. I didn't go searching for the truth. Found me. It was a Saturday afternoon. Daniel had left with his father, and I decided to clean the study. I hadn't touched it in months because his parents didn't like me messing with Daniel's things. But something inside me told me to walk in that day. Maybe it was instinct? Maybe it was the quiet voice I had ignored for too long. On his desk sat a stack of papers. I shuffled them absent-mindedly until one slipped out, a receipt. A jewelry store receipt. My heart thudded when I saw the date, last week. The same day I had given him the watch and the item, a necklace. Diamond-studded, twice the price of the watch I had saved for. For me? No. I would have known. He hadn't given me anything in months. My breath grew shallow. My fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling the edge as my mind spun. I remembered the way Anna had been glowing at dinner, the way she had touched her neck and smiled. A chill ran through me. No, it couldn't be. Could it? The door creaked and I jumped, shoving the paper under a book just as Daniel walked in. He looked at me suspiciously. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning," I said flatly. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press further. He grabbed a file and left without another word. I waited until his footsteps faded before pulling the receipt back out. My hands trembled, my stomach twisted, but my mind felt oddly calm. This was no longer about being an outsider. It was about being lied to. And the cruelest part, it wasn't. Even the betrayal itself that hurt the most, it was the realization that I had been blind, holding on to a love that no longer existed. For the first time, the silence inside me wasn't empty. It was filling with resolve. The receipt wouldn't leave my mind. I tried to convince myself there could be another explanation. Maybe it was for his mother. Maybe even for me, and he was saving it for an occasion. but deep down, I already knew. The cracks had been there for months. His distracted answers, his long hours at work that didn't add up, the way he avoided eye contact when I asked about simple things. And Anna, her smug glances, the way she seemed to know things before I did. I decided to watch more carefully. Not accuse, not confront, just observe. That night at dinner, Anna wore a new necklace. I noticed it immediately, the way the stones caught the light. My heart stuttered. She reached up and touched it, smiling almost to herself. "It's beautiful," Daniel's mother remarked. "Thank you," Anna replied, her voice sweet, but her eyes darted toward Daniel for the briefest second. It was quick, almost unnoticeable, but not to me. I clenched my hands under the table. My fork pressed into my palm so hard it left a mark. After dinner, I went upstairs early, pretending to have a headache. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I had just seen. The puzzle pieces were lining up, and I hated the picture they were forming. It wasn't just about being excluded anymore. I wasn't invisible, I was being replaced. A part of me wanted to scream, to storm downstairs and demand answers. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced for too long, told me to wait, to gather proof, to let the truth come out in its own time. Because sometimes, silence is more powerful than words. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even break down. I just lay there, staring into the dark, letting the anger settle into something sharper, something that felt like steel. The confirmation didn't come with fireworks or a dramatic confession. It came in whispers, careless words, and patterns too obvious to ignore. One morning, I walked into the kitchen earlier than usual. Daniel was already there, his phone pressed. To his ear, he didn't notice me at first. "Yes, I'll see you tonight," he said softly. His voice wasn't the clipped tone he used with coworkers. It was tender, almost playful. Then he paused. "Don't worry, she won't suspect a thing." She hit me like a blade. When he saw me, he nearly jumped. He ended the call quickly, muttering something about a client, but his eyes gave him away. They were guilty, wide, searching for a lie he could throw between us. I didn't ask. I just smiled faintly and poured myself tea. That silence unsettled him more than any confrontation could. Later that week, while folding laundry in the guest room, I found one of Daniel's shirts stuffed into the back of a drawer. The smell clung to a taste of perfume that wasn't mine. Sweet, heavy, expensive. My chest tightened. I didn't need to ask whose it was. Every small detail became a scream I couldn't unhear. The way Anna's phone lit up at dinner, and she turned it face down with a secret smile. The sudden business trips Daniel claimed, which oddly matched nights Anna disappeared without explanation. The careful glances they thought no one noticed. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. The truth was standing right in front of me, holding hands when they thought no one was watching. But I didn't explode. Not yet. Because I realized something important: betrayal has a way of exposing itself. You don't always have to tear the curtain down. Sometimes, you just wait and watch as they pull it down themselves. And I was ready. Asterisk secrets have a way of leaking, even when people think they're careful. And Daniel and Anna, they weren't as clever as they believed. It started with whispers in the neighborhood. One evening, I overheard two women at the grocery store, standing by the fruit aisle. "Have you noticed how often Daniel is seen with Anna lately?" One said, the other chuckled. "Strange, isn't it? He's her Anna. Some things just don't look right." I froze, holding a basket of apples, my face carefully blank. They didn't know I was behind them, but I knew their words weren't just idle gossip. They were reflecting what everyone had started to notice at family gatherings. The tension grew heavier. Daniel would find excuses to help Anna in the kitchen, his hand brushing against hers a little too comfortably. Once, I caught my mother-in-law watching them with narrowed eyes. She didn't say a word, but her silence carried weight. And then came the mistake that shattered their fragile secrecy. One night, Daniel returned home late. His shirt was crumpled, and for the first time, he didn't bother to erase the evidence. A lipstick stain, faint but undeniable, was smeared near his collar. He tried to slip past me in the hallway, but I stopped him with one simple sentence. "You smell like her." His body stiffened. His eyes darted away, searching for a denial, but nothing came out. For the first time, Daniel didn't have a lie ready. I walked past him without waiting for a response. I could feel his panic, his world tilting because he realized the game was slipping from his control. And Anna, she wasn't faring much better. A neighbor mentioned seeing her shopping with Daniel out of town. She laughed it off, but her laughter was too sharp, too rehearsed. People were starting to put the pieces together. they thought they were untouchable. But the truth was spreading faster than they could cover it up. And I, quiet, watchful, patient, wasn't going to stop it. Asterisk, once suspicion takes root, it spreads like fire. And for Daniel and Anna, the smoke was everywhere at a Sunday lunch. I sat silently at the table, letting the scene play out. Anna poured water for Daniel before anyone else. My aunt, sitting across, raised an eyebrow. "Such care, Anna," she said lightly, though her tone carried a sharp edge. "You'd think Daniel was your husband." Forks clattered against plates. Daniel coughed into his hand. Anna's smile faltered for half a second before she forced a laugh. "Oh, don't be silly." But no one laughed with her. Not this time. Later, I overheard my cousin whisper to my aunt in the hallway, "Do you think something is going on?" My aunt's voice was low but firm. "You can't hide that kind of closeness forever." Every word was like a small stone added to the pile of evidence against them. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. Their own choices were revealing them. Then came the turning point. Daniel's boss invited us to a company dinner. I didn't want to go, but something in me said I should. I dressed simply, stayed quiet, and observed. Halfway through the evening, while speeches were being made, Anna walked in. She wasn't invited. The room shifted instantly. Murmurs rippled across tables. Daniel froze in his chair, his fork halfway to his mouth. When he finally stood up to greet her, too quickly, too nervously, the damage was done. Everyone noticed. One of his colleagues leaned toward me and whispered, "That's unusual, isn't it?" I smiled faintly, saying nothing. By the end of the night, Daniel's reputation wasn't as polished as before. People saw what they weren't supposed to see. And the thing about rumors is, they don't die. They grow. Daniel and Anna thought I was powerless. But I knew better. I didn't need to expose them. They were exposing themselves, one careless moment at a time. And I only had to wait. Asterisk, it didn't take long for the whispers to reach home. Families like mine don't need proof. Just the scent of scandal is enough. At breakfast one morning, my aunt casually stirred her tea and said, "People are talking, Daniel. They say you and Anna are a little too close." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's jaw tightened. Anna dropped her spoon and milk splashed across the table. "That's ridiculous," Daniel snapped. "Gossip, nothing more." But his voice was too sharp to defensive. My uncle cleared his throat. "Son, you should be careful. Reputation is fragile. One crack, and it shatters." I kept my eyes on my plate, hiding the small smile tugging at my lips. For the first time, the weight wasn't on MIT, was on them. Later that week, at a family gathering, the tension was even worse. Cousins whispered behind cupped hands. Neighbors gave knowing looks. When Anna tried to serve dessert, someone muttered just loud enough, "Maybe she should serve Daniel first. She's used to it." The room broke into uncomfortable laughter. Anna's face burned red. Daniel stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "Enough," he barked. "We don't have to sit here and take this." But they did. Because walking away didn't erase the looks, the doubts, the judgment. I sat quietly, almost invisible, watching as the walls closed in on them. Every rumor was a mirror turned toward their choices. Every whisper was a punishment they couldn't escape. For years, I was the outsider at this table, the one overlooked, dismissed, treated like I didn't belong. But now, they were the outsiders, and they had made that bed themselves. The sweetest part, I didn't say a single word. Asterisk, the shift didn't happen in one dramatic explosion. It was quiet, almost unnoticeable at first, like the air changing before a storm. I stopped trying. That was the first step. No more desperate attempts to earn approval. No more bending myself into something I wasn't. I spoke less at the table, laughed less at jokes that cut too close. And when they ignored me, I simply let them, and strangely, it unsettled them. One night, my mother-in-law asked, "Why are you so quiet these days?" I shrugged. Maybe I just don't have much to say. The look she gave me, half suspicious, half uncertain, was priceless. For years, I had given her the satisfaction of seeing me try, seeing me beg for scraps of belonging. Without that, she had nothing to feed on. Daniel noticed too. He came home late one evening and asked, "You're not waiting up anymore." "No," I said simply. I was tired. He stared at me, as if the simplicity of my answer unnerved him more than any argument ever could. Inside, something was rebuilding itself. I wasn't healed. Not yet, but I was no longer crawling. I was standing at family gatherings. I started choosing a seat at the far end, away from the center. I'd speak only when spoken to. No effort, no struggle. And the strangest thing happened, they began to glance at me, noticing my absence inside my own silence. The shift wasn't about power in the traditional sense. It wasn't that I had control over them, it was that they no longer had control over me. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift just enough to breathe again. Asterisk. The more I stepped back, the more they stepped on their own traps. At a family brunch, Daniel tried to pull me into a conversation, leaning close, smiling too widely. "Come on, don't be like that," he said, attempting charm. I tilted my head and sipped my coffee. "Like what?" His smile faltered. He glanced at Anna, who gave a tight-lipped smile, clearly annoyed. My silence carried more weight than any argument could. Later, while setting the table for dinner, my mother-in-law asked, "Did you hear? The neighbors are talking." "About what?" I asked, folding the napkins slowly. She hesitated. "About Daniel and Anna." I nodded as if I already knew, my calm voice soft but firm. "I see." Daniel slammed the kitchen cabinet later, muttering under his breath. Anna shot me a glare, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Even my own small actions started shifting. Things I stopped offering to help. I stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I started taking up my space literally and figuratively without their permission. And they noticed at the next family gathering, the tension was palpable. Conversations faltered when I entered the room. Chairs shifted. Eyes darted. The power they had wielded over me for years was slipping away. And for the first time, I watched them scramble. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I only observed a quiet force finally moving in my favor. For years, I had been the outsider. But now, the center of attention wasn't mine. It was theirs. Their fear, their guilt, their unraveling. And it was beautiful. Asterisk, the moment I had been waiting for finally arrived, and not with a scream. Not with confrontation, but with quiet inevitability. It was a family gathering, one of the largest of the year. The kind where everyone notices every detail. Daniel and Anna tried their usual act smiles too wide, laughter too loud, but they were exhausted. Tension radiated from them like heat from a fire. A neighbor, casually commenting while serving appetizers, mentioned, "It must be hard, pretending everything is fine when people already know." Anna's hand trembled as she reached for a plate. Daniel's jaw clenched. My aunt shot them a look that said more than words ever could. I sat, quietly a calm in the storm. My presence alone seemed to shift the room. People weren't whispering about me, they were noticing the imbalance, the consequences of their choices. Later that evening, Daniel finally cornered me in the study, desperate for some semblance of control. "Why are you acting like nothing's wrong?" he asked. I looked at him, level and steady. "Because it's not about me anymore. It's about you. You've made your choices. I've made mine." The power in my words hit him harder than any argument. I could see it, the realization that nothing he could say or do would rewrite the past. That night, I packed my things quietly. No dramatic goodbyes, no arguments, just me walking out of the house. I had never truly belonged to Dot. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight lift completely. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving the doubt, the neglect, the betrayal. I was reclaiming my life. And for the first time in years, I breathed freely. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were no grand reconciliations, no sudden remorse from them, but it was mine. Earned, real, and powerful. Sometimes walking away is the strongest form of justice. And in that quiet departure, I found the one thing I had been denied for so long: myself.